Hey all, my name's Tanner. I'm one of the assistant chiefs here at Thrust Flight at our Addison location. I've been with the company now for about 4 years, been instructing for about a year and a half. So today we're going to go over the audio panel of our G1000 system, as well as a couple of the other CNS functions that are included in that section in our pilot operating guide. All right, first we're going to talk about our audio panel here, which is going to be right in the center of our PFD and our MFD. Okay, so this audio panel is going to be the brains of everything that has to do with audio. So it's going to control three main functions. The first is going to be our comms, the second is going to be our navs, and the third is going to be our intercom. Okay? So first of all, for comm, we have our annunciator lights up here. We have COM 1, COM 2, and an AUX mic, which is unused at this point. So COM 1 and COM 2 are going to reflect on either our PFD or our MFD up here in the upper right of the screen. And they're going to show the active frequencies for each of the comms that we have selected. So the active frequency is going to be towards the inner part of the screen. The standby is going to be towards the outer part to my right here. Right? So this will be our standby, this will be our active. The green highlighted frequency is going to be the one that we are actively transmitting on. So I can have an active frequency in both COM 1 and COM 2, but I'm only going to be able to transmit on COM 1. And that's also shown by the annunciator light here on the COM 1 mic. In order to tune the COM, I've got a couple of different options. The first is twisting this big COM knob. So all of the Garmin knobs have this same kind of interface where they have this outer knob, this big one, and this inner knob, the little knob here, that are independently rotating. So if I have this little blue box around COM 1 here, that's going to tell me which COM I'm moving. And I'm going to twist the big knob to change the big numbers, the little knob to change the little numbers, right? So the big numbers are going to be to the left of the decimal, the little numbers are going to be to the right of the decimal. All right, once I have that tuned, then I can press this swap key directly above the COM knob. It's got two little arrows on it. And that's going to change my active and my standby frequencies. That's going to swap those two frequencies back and forth. If I want to switch from tuning a frequency on COM 1 to tuning a frequency on COM 2, I'm going to press in the COM knob, which changes this little blue box here to switch on COM 2 for those frequencies. And then I do the exact same thing. Big knob for big numbers, little knob for little numbers. And again, the swap key will work here on whatever blue box is highlighted, whether that's COM 1 or COM 2. The second option for tuning a COM is going to be from several different auxiliary pages. So I can go to the flight plan page, I can go to the nearest page, I can go to the waypoint page, and they all list frequencies for different airports. And I can highlight those frequencies and tune them. So let's go to one of those now. If I go over here to my knob on my MFD and go to the waypoint page, I have Addison up here. I have Addison Airport. Then I can scroll all the way down with that big FMS knob to any one of these frequencies here, and I can throw it in whichever COM I'd like. So right now I have ATIS here highlighted on 133.4. I want to put that in my COM 2 active, let's say. So I'm going to hit enter, and then I have a bunch of options here on this little pop-up window up in the upper right corner of my MFD here, and I'm going to load it into COM 2 active. So I have that highlighted, and then press it, and now it's showing up here on both sides of my window. All right. Now, I already had ATIS in there, so it wasn't as apparent, but if I go to, let's say, ground, and I want to put that in my COM 2 active, what it's going to do, I'm going to highlight this, I'm going to hit enter, I'm going to put it in COM 2 active, and it's going to swap my previously active frequency into the standby of COM 2. So it doesn't override what was the active frequency in COM 2. It moves the active frequency from COM 2 active to COM 2 standby and replaces it with the new frequency that you've selected from that channel, from that page. So for the audio panel portion of this, right now I have the annunciators illuminated for COM 1 mic and COM 1 here on the right-hand side. So this is telling me I am transmitting and receiving on COM 1. If I wanted to transmit and receive on COM 2, I'm going to press the COM 2 mic button, and you can see both of these annunciators are now illuminated down here, as well as a third one up here on COM 1. What that is telling me is I am transmitting and receiving on COM 2, and I am monitoring COM 1. So if I don't want to monitor COM 1, which means I can hear the stuff coming in from COM 1, but I can't talk back to them, I'm going to press this COM1 button. It extinguishes that annunciator, and then we go from there and transmit and receive on COM2 just like we normally would. So now when I switch back from COM2 to COM1, you'll see that the COM2 monitoring light is not illuminated, right? It's extinguished, and I'm just solely transmitting on COM1 mic and COM1. I'm already on COM1, and I want to monitor COM2, so I want to listen what's coming out of COM2. I'm going to press just the COM2 button, and you'll see I have this annunciator illuminated here on the right under COM2, but the COM2 mic annunciator is not illuminated. It's extinguished over here, which means I'm talking on COM1, I'm listening to COM1, and I'm also listening to COM2. So the other function that we have here with our audio panel that we can use for our COM1 is we have a playback feature. So all the way at the bottom here, there's this button that says play in the bottom left. If I press it, it'll be illuminated and it'll see it flashing here. And what this does is it's going to record and play back to me the last 2 minutes of radio transmissions. So if I'm up in the air, I'm talking to approach, I can't remember what they said, I can't remember what squawk code they told me to put in there, then I'm going to press that playback button and it's going to repeat it back to me. Now, this playback button only works when there isn't incoming radio traffic. So maybe approach isn't the best example for that because I'm going to get stepped on all the time. It's going to stop the playback and then I won't be able to hear what they said previously. Now, it does record the previous 2 minutes. If I am in a situation to listen to this playback, I press it multiple times to scroll all the way back to the playback that I actually want to listen to. So if I press it once, I'm going to listen to the immediate previous playback. I press it twice, it's going to skip to 2 playbacks ago, and so on and so forth. Now, these playbacks, they may not have anything to do with me, but they're whatever was received over that radio. So if I put this on speaker here, which we'll talk about in just a second, I'm going to play some audio here through the speaker. I press this playback.
Tower, Cessna Sky, Fox number 3080 Papa, American Flyer, south, ready to taxi with him.
And then I can go back, right? So in this case, we only had one audio previously recorded, and that's all we'll be able to hear. And if I want to stop the playback anytime, I just press that play button again. The light will extinguish. And you see right now it's flashing. I press it again and it extinguishes. It stops the playback. I can go about my business. So we've talked a little bit about the COM functions on the audio panel and just comms in general on the G1000. Next, we're going to talk about our nav radios. So our navigation radios are going to be the things that guide us using navigational aids. In this case, maybe VORs, maybe it's an NDB, maybe something else, right? An ILS for an instrument approach, right? And for the most part, tuning those are going to work exactly the same way as tuning a COM. So if I go over here to my MFD, I'm on the left side of my MFD with this nav knob. It looks a lot like the COM knob. It's just got a different label above it, right? And that's exactly what we want to see. So again, I'm looking at my MFD on the left-hand side here, and it's the same way. So I have 2 navs installed on this aircraft. The nav 1 is going to be on top, nav 2 is going to be on the bottom. We have our active frequencies to the right-hand side, and we have our standby frequencies to the left. You'll notice there is no green highlight, unlike we see on our COM over here. That's because I'm not listening to any nav currently. So the same way that I would tune a COM, I'm going to tune my nav. I have this blue box highlighting nav 1 standby. I can twist the big knob for big numbers, the little knob for little numbers. And again, those big numbers are going to be to the left of the decimal. The little numbers are going to be to the right of the decimal. And then I press in to swap between tuning nav 1 and tuning nav 2. And if we look under here on both the nav and the COM from earlier, it says push 1-2, and that's what it's telling you there. So I've tuned my nav 1. Let's go to 1146. I won't be able to receive anything on there, but that's going to be a frequency for one of our VORs. And so now I've got this tuned here. I'm going to press my swap key to put it in the active, and I'm good to go. Okay. So if I put this back in here, we'll notice in a minute I'm going to receive and have printed up here a little IADS. Okay, that's our localizer frequency here for the Addison Airport, and the Garmin has identified it as that frequency. So it's going to do whatever it does behind the scenes and tell me that that identifier is the proper source for that nav frequency. So now I can point to that when I'm in instrument training and go, that's identified. Okay. So after I've got my frequency up here in nav 1, I can press this over here to put it into the active, and then I need to do a couple things to actually listen to it. The first is going to be pressing this nav 1 button. I've got this annunciator illuminated here, and then I've got to press the nav volume knob. It says push ID, and we see ID up there. So what that's going to allow us to do is for the G1000 to identify that navigational aid for us, and then we can go over to our CDI, switch the modes, and be able to actually follow that navigational source. And so we see after it has a second, we've got this TTT for our Maverick VOR, and that's because it's identifying it up here. Now it can still identify it even when this isn't on, but if I want to listen to that physical Morse code, I've got to have nav1 selected on the audio panel, and I've got to press this and show ID up there in the nav1 box. So you'll notice that even though I was listening to nav1 here a second ago, right, I still don't have a green frequency up here like I would on my COM1. So what I'm going to do to get that frequency green is I have to be using the nav. So I'm going to go down here to my soft key on my PFD and switch my CDI mode to, in this case, localizer 1. It would say VOR 1, respectively, if I was listening to a VOR frequency. And now I've got my localizer here for Addison illuminated green on my nav1 active. So it's not so much about listening to the nav1 here, because that identifier will be up there regardless. And if I extinguish this nav1 annunciator, it doesn't really do anything. That just lets me listen to it, but it doesn't affect the workings of the G1000 itself. So all I need to make that nav1 active frequency green is to cycle through my CDI modes, and I'm now on CDI 2, so localizer 2, which is going to illuminate this green, and then I go back to my FMS and neither of them are green. So a few other functions that I have here on the G1000 navigational section of the audio panel is I've got my nav1 and nav2 here on the right-hand side near the center. I've got DME and I've got ADF, which function almost identical to what I just showed you on nav1 and nav2. We don't have DME or ADF installed in these aircraft, so I won't be able to show you how those work. Just refer to your pilot's guide and it'll be able to tell you exactly how to use those functions. They'll be with the soft keys down on the bottom, and then I'll listen to the DME frequency or listen to the ADF receiver up here in the audio panel. So now if we go down a little bit further, there's some intercom functions we'll cover here in a second. We're going to go down to the bottom part of this audio panel and talk about two buttons that are down here. We have marker mute, or MKR mute, and we have high sens, or high sensitivity. Both of these are used for our marker beacons on our instrument approaches. So the marker mute button has a couple of functions, but it kind of is what it exactly sounds like, which is I'm going to mute the marker beacons so they don't beep in my ear constantly as I'm approaching them. If I am coming up on a marker beacon on an instrument approach, it will be illuminated above my airspeed tape or right next to my airspeed tape on my PFD, and then I can mute that annunciator when it's beeping at me with this marker mute button. So if I hit my outer marker, I press this marker mute, it's now illuminated, and it's going to stop yelling at me for a second until I get to the middle marker. Now at the middle marker, it will yell at me again, and I've got to press this marker mute again to mute the middle marker, and again with the inner marker. So it doesn't stay muted throughout all three markers. I will need to mute it again for each marker that I go in, but at least again, that way it makes sure that I'm safe and that I hear the marker to begin with, and then I can mute it and turn off that warning so I can focus on flying the aircraft afterwards. So aside from the marker mute button here, I have another one, this high sensitivity button. Again, this has an annunciator built into this button, so when I press it, it's going to illuminate here. And what that will do is allow me to listen to the marker beacons a little bit further out than I would be able to without this button pressed. So if I'm in an area with a lot of radio interference, or I just can't get a good signal on those marker beacons, I'll press this to make sure that I hear those markers when I'm on an instrument approach. Again, cycle the button, extinguish the illuminator, and we're done. So just the same way that I would be able to tune a comm frequency from a nearest page, a waypoint page, maybe even my flight plan, I can do the exact same thing with my nav radio. So I'm going to go over here to the MFD. I'm going to scroll over to my waypoint page. I'm going to go to, now scroll down to, let's say, VOR information. I have the Maverick VOR here in Addison, and you'll notice on the right-hand side, it's got a frequency box, just like it would on the comm page. So now I can press in, scroll all the way down with my FMS knob, highlight that frequency, so we've got it flashing now. And I'm clicked on that, and now it's highlighted and it's flashing. And now I can press enter and send this frequency to the nav1 active or standby and the nav2 active or standby. So when I actually select from those options, hit enter again, and now it sends it up to the nav1. So the last function of the audio panel that we have here is our intercom. So we've talked about everything that goes on outside the aircraft with our comms and our nav radios. And now we're going to talk about how to communicate with each other, how to communicate with our passengers behind us, and how to talk between, in this case, our instructor and our student, or our pilot and our co-pilot. So here in the center, we have our intercom modes, or our isolation modes. They're outlined by this fine white box here around these three buttons. And there's a million combinations of things that we can do with these. The pilot's guide goes a little more in depth, or all of those if you want to go and do your own research on those. We'll cover the basic functions here today for our 4-place intercom that we have installed in the Archer. This audio panel can support up to 6 people, so depending on what aircraft you're in, will depend a little bit on how this is rigged. So when the system boots up, we have our default mode. We have our pilot ICS, or pilot isolation, co-pilot ICS, again, co-pilot isolation. These are both illuminated, both annunciators are illuminated, and the passenger isolate is extinguished. So what this does is it allows me to communicate between myself and the person here in the right seat, my student, my instructor, my co-pilot in the right seat here. I can't talk to the people in the back. They can't hear me, I can't hear them, but they can hear each other. So the two folks in the back seat can talk to each other, and the two folks in the front seat can talk to each other. So if I want to talk to the folks in the back seat here, I'm going to press this passenger isolate. I have this annunciator illuminated now, and it temporarily brings up this volume knob here. We'll talk about that in a second. So now I have all 3 of these lights illuminated here, which means I can hear everybody else, and everybody else can hear me, and everybody else can hear the aircraft. So if I get a radio transmission, now my passengers will also be able to hear it, as well as, of course, the pilot and co-pilot. So the thing to remember here with the intercom system is that, again, it's designed to be user-friendly. So if we have any variety of these annunciators illuminated or extinguished, what we need to know is that anything that's illuminated can hear each other and talk to each other. Anything that is not illuminated can hear any other not illuminated sections and talk to those sections, but the two can't cross-communicate. So in this case, the pilot and co-pilot can talk to each other because they're both illuminated. The passengers can't talk to either of the front people, and the passengers can hear each other in the back because they're both on the same section here. They're both on the same isolation mode. So when I illuminate the passengers, they can hear everybody, and everybody can hear them. They can hear all the radio transmissions. And the one caveat with this passenger isolation mode, is if I have an incoming radio transmission, it mutes the passengers in the back. So if someone's talking to me on approach or departure or tower or ground, I can hear it in the pilot's headset, I can hear it in the co-pilot's headset, but the passengers won't be able to hear the internal intercoms anymore. So we just have to watch out for that and know that if someone started a sentence when tower started transmitting, that we won't be able to hear them up here in the front seats if they're talking to us from the back. So now, if I want to make an announcement over the PA, in a Piper Archer, it's probably never going to happen, but the button's here and it works, so we're going to show you anyway. I have 2 buttons built into one here, and it's this one right below the intercom isolation modes. That's speaker, SPKR, and PA, which is our annunciator there. So we're going to press this once and it will illuminate, and this means that I'm listening to the speaker. So if I were to go and listen to Addis here, I can listen to that Addis over the speaker. I shouldn't really ever need to, because I should always be wearing a headset per our POH in the Piper Archer, but there are other aircraft in which I don't need to. If I press and hold this for 2 seconds, I now have this little PA annunciator. You can probably barely see it, but it's right next to the speaker PA button here. It's illuminated a little white light, and that's telling me that I'm now making a PA announcement. So I've got this little PA annunciator illuminated here on the audio panel. I no longer have a COM1 or COM2 annunciator illuminated, and there is no more green shown on COM1 or COM2. The reason for that is with this PA mode activated, I can now use my push-to-talk microphone button on the yoke to transmit a message to the passengers through their headset or through the speaker, depending on which mode I have activated. Again, in an Archer, in a 4-place airplane, not really practical or necessary, in a larger one, potentially. And what that would allow me to do, on my intercom here, I have pilot and co-pilot isolated, so I can hear the entire front seat if I'm sitting in the front, but I can't hear anyone in the back and they can't hear me. This allows me to bridge that gap. So I have this PA annunciator illuminated here. I press the button and I can talk to the folks in the back without them being able to talk back to me, just like you would see in a commercial airliner. If I wanted to make that announcement over the speaker instead of over their headsets, I'd press quick press this speaker button here, which illuminates this annunciator, the PA announcement would come through the speaker in the aircraft rather than the headsets. So now to turn off this PA function and get back talking to the tower folks, I'm going to press and hold. It extinguishes that PA annunciator. It re-illuminates my 2 annunciators up here for COM 1, and I now have green COM 1 showing that I can use my push-to-talk to transmit on that mic. I'll tap this again to turn my speaker function off, and we've restored the audio panel back to its defaults. All right, so the next portion of the audio panel that we have here is our volume adjustment and our squelch adjustment. So the volume is going to be this big knob here at the bottom, and again, it works like any of the other Garmin knobs that we kind of talked about. So this outside one is going to be labeled right here as cursor, and then the inside one is going to actually adjust the volume for whatever person or thing I have selected here. So I am going to turn this big knob, and we'll see it immediately starts flashing. It's flashing volume, it's flashing on the pilot isolate. So now I can turn the little knob, and you'll see it's decreasing the volume and increasing the volume again down here right above this little illuminated annunciator above this knob, and the pilot's flashing, which means I'm changing the headset volume for the intercom for the pilot. So if my co-pilot is coming through really loud and the radios are coming through kind of soft, rather than just turning up this or turning down the volume on my headset, I can twist this big knob to highlight me as the pilot, and then twist this little knob to change the volume so the folks inside the cockpit come up through my headset a little quieter. If the co-pilot wants to change his volume, it's the same process. You're going to twist this outer knob, co-pilot's going to flash, you twist the inner knob here, this little knob, to change, increase, or decrease the volume shown here above this knob. Even if someone isn't illuminated, I can continue to twist this knob and change the passenger volume, even if it doesn't matter. I can change COM 1, I can change COM 2 if I were to have that illuminated instead. I can change the speaker volume if I have that illuminated. I can change music volume if I'm using Bluetooth, all that kind of stuff. So this big cursor here, this outer knob functions as our cursor, is going to just scroll through all these available options. The little knob is going to change the volume on the selected option. So squelch is going to be changed much the same way that changing volume will. Squelch is going to be the lowest volume at which a transmission can make it through our radios, make it through our intercoms. So it's a way of blocking out all the background noise from the prop, the engine, just people, sniffing into their headsets, whatever that might be. We're going to look at how to change that now. So if I go over here, again, it's pretty much the same process. The G1000's audio panel has built-in automatic squelch, so you really shouldn't have to change this much. It figures out kind of what the ambience noise volume is and determines how to squelch the volume from there. If I want to manually set it, let's say my headset is way different than my co-pilot and it's just picking up all kinds of extra noise, I'm going to hit this manual squelch button, and then I see down here I have SQ for squelch illuminated instead of volume. Now I can turn this outer knob, and so now once this is illuminated and flashing, I can turn this inner knob here to decrease or increase the squelch. If a lot of background noise is coming through, I'm going to increase the squelch. If I'm having to yell into my microphone to talk, I'm going to decrease the squelch. And then I can press this volume knob here to extinguish all that flashing, but I need to keep this manual squelch light illuminated. If I don't keep that light illuminated, it's going to revert back to the automatic squelch, and I'll have undone everything that I just did. All right, so another function that we're going to go over here is the Bluetooth functionality. Again, refer to your pilot's operating guide for more information on here. We're just going to kind of glance over this area because we don't use it a whole lot at thrust. We want to make sure that we're focused on the task at hand, and there's plenty to do in the plane while we're instructing. The Bluetooth buttons are going to be located right next to our isolation modes here in the middle, and we know they're Bluetooth because they're outlined in blue, right? So I have telephone, music 1, and music 2. I can turn on any of these, adjust the volume on any of those, and cycle through a few different modes. So there's 2 music modes because we can actually have different music going to the front versus through the back. Again, in a 4-place airplane, probably not necessary or really ever used, but this way you can Bluetooth the device directly to the audio panel so your passengers can receive phone calls and listen to music of their choice instead of individuals doing it through their own headsets, as some of those have the functionality there. The Bluetooth, when that's active, we can now use the marker mute key to press that and mute the music. There's also auto mute functions built in for radio transmissions, that sort of thing on the Bluetooth. So like I said before, read your pilot operating manual for the most updated information on the Bluetooth functionality for our Garmin G1000 audio panel. All right, so the last part of this audio panel is going to be this red button at the bottom. Now this is display backup, and what this is going to do is our manual override for reversionary mode. So originally, reversionary mode is going to be this. If I lose power to a screen, the G1000 is automatically going to sense that this screen isn't working anymore, and if we give it a second, it's going to kick everything over to this side, okay? So it's going to do that by itself because it's a smart system. It wants to reduce the workload on the pilot as much as physically possible. So we're going to let this screen boot back up here. And now what I'm going to show you is if for some reason it doesn't do that, or let's say the screen itself got broken and it doesn't know that there's no continuity between the screen, but for whatever reason, I can't read stuff on this screen. I'm going to press this display backup. It's going to pop out and it's going to revert both screens to this exact window. Now, I still have all my engine instruments. I've still got my GPS. I've still got all my flight instruments. I can pretty much do anything that I would with two screens on the one. And then I press this button again to reset it, and it goes back to the default mode. All right, y'all, that's it for the G1000 audio panel today. If you have any questions on this video, leave a comment down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any further videos.